Madeline's fingers gripped the cold metal door handle, her breath shallow as she stepped into the house that had once been hers. The place where she had grown up, where laughter filled the rooms and memories were made. Now, it felt like a stranger's house. The weight of the past few months hit her all at once. The arguments, the words that cut deeper than any knife. Her sister, Lily, her own flesh and blood, had kicked her out. Just like that. No explanation, no remorse. One moment they were laughing over old family stories, and the next, Madeline found herself standing in the driveway, suitcase in hand, her entire world crumbling. "Madeline, you're a burden. I can't deal with this anymore," Lily had said, her voice cold, distant, as if Madeline were nothing more than an inconvenience. It wasn't the first time Lily had thrown her out. They'd had their disagreements, sure, but this was different. This time, Madeline didn't have anywhere to go. She was on her own. Alone. But what hurt the most wasn't being thrown out. It was the betrayal. The betrayal from the one person she thought would always have her back. Madeline hadn't begged. She hadn't even cried. She just walked away, head held high, as the door slammed shut behind her. In the days that followed, Madeline had a lot of time to think, to reflect. And the more she thought, the more she realized something. Maybe it wasn't just her sister who had failed her. Maybe, in some strange way, she had failed herself, too. She had spent so much time taking care of everyone else, trying to please people who didn't even care, that she'd forgotten how to stand up for herself, how to be strong on her own. But that was about to change. She had nothing left to lose. No family to turn to, no safety net. It was just her now. And that thought, at first terrifying, started to feel empowering. What if this was her chance to prove to herself that she didn't need anyone's approval to succeed? The night she left the house, she hadn't known where she was going. Now, though, with a renewed sense of purpose, Madeline knew exactly what she had to do. She was going to come back stronger, not just for herself, but to show Lily that kicking her out was the worst decision she'd ever made. Madeline found a small apartment in the city, one that was modest, but enough to give her a fresh start. The first few weeks were hard. She had no job, no income, but she worked tirelessly, sending out resumes, applying to every job she could find. She kept reminding herself of one thing. She wasn't going to let this defeat her. Not anymore. Her sister's betrayal had ignited something inside her, something fierce. Madeline wasn't the weak, lost girl she used to be. She was going to take control of her life, no matter what it took. But what she didn't know was that her return wouldn't just be about success. It would be about exposing the hidden truths that had been buried for years. The things that no one, not even Lily, knew about their family. And when those truths came to light, everything would change. It wasn't easy. The days blurred into one another, filled with job interviews, late nights hunched over her laptop, and constant self-doubt. Madeline knew what people thought of her. She could see the pity in their eyes, the looks they gave her when they found out her sister had kicked her out. Most people whispered behind her back, wondering how a family could turn on each other like that. But no one truly understood the pain of being thrown out, of feeling like you didn't belong in the place that was supposed to be your safe haven. But Madeline wasn't the type to wallow in pity. She had bigger plans, bigger dreams. One day, after weeks of endless searching, she finally landed a job. It wasn't glamorous, just a small assistant position at a tech company. but it was a start. And with that start, Madeline took the first step in her journey. She poured everything she had into her work. She learned quickly, made connections, and slowly started gaining respect. The office environment was competitive, but Madeline thrived on the challenge. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had something to prove, both to herself and to the people who had written her off. As the months passed, Madeline started building a new life for herself. She was no longer the scared, insecure girl who had been thrown out of her own home. She was becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone who wouldn't let anyone walk all over her again. Her confidence grew with each passing day. She was saving money, planning her next move. This was just the beginning. But then came the day that changed everything. She was sitting in her small apartment, going over her budget and looking at potential career opportunities when she received an unexpected call. It was from her mother. "Madeline, where are you?" Her mother's voice trembled, as if she had been holding something in for too long. Madeline hesitated, her heart pounding. She hadn't heard from her family since the day she was kicked out. Her mother had stayed silent, not wanting to get involved in the mess. She had stayed out of it, letting Lily handle everything. But now it seemed like something had changed. "I'm fine," Madeline replied, her voice steady despite the emotions threatening to rise. "Why? What's wrong?" "It's about Lily," her mother said, her voice quivering. "She's been trying to get in touch with you. She's sorry for what happened. She didn't mean for things to go the way they did." Madeline's heart sank. She didn't know what to feel. A part of her wanted to feel vindicated, to tell her mother everything that had been building up inside of her. The rage, the hurt, the betrayal. But another part of her, the part that was learning to be stronger, wanted to move forward. She had come so far. She wasn't the girl who needed anyone's approval anymore. But as the days went by, the weight of her mother's words stayed with her. She couldn't stop thinking about what Lily had done. And despite the pain, she couldn't ignore the one burning question. Why? Why had Lily done it? Why had her own sister, the one person she had trusted the most, turned on her? The desire for answers gnawed at her, and a part of her knew she needed to face her sister. Not for forgiveness, not yet, but for closure. She had been living in the shadows for far too long, trying to bury the pain. It was time to confront it. Madeline took a deep breath and called Lily. The phone rang twice before Lily picked up, her voice sounding hesitant. "Madeline, is that really you?" she asked, her tone guarded. "I think we need to talk," Madeline said, her voice calm but firm. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened, and I need answers." Lily was silent for a moment. Then she sighed. "I know, Madeline. I know. I've been thinking about it too. You have every right to be angry. What I did, I was wrong, but there's more to it than you know." Madeline's heart skipped a beat. "More to it than I know?" The words felt like a bomb waiting to explode. What was Lily hiding? What could be worse than what had already happened? "I'm listening," Madeline said, her voice steady, though inside she was already bracing herself for whatever revelation was coming. "Can we meet?" Lily asked, her voice barely a whisper. Madeline hesitated, but only for a moment. She had come this far. She was ready to hear the truth, whatever it was. "Okay, let's meet." They agreed to meet at a small cafe, the kind of place where nobody knew them, a neutral ground where neither could hide behind the walls they had built. When Madeline arrived, She saw Lily sitting alone, her face pale, her eyes red. She hadn't expected to see this side of her sister, the vulnerable side, the side that, for years, had been hidden beneath layers of pride and arrogance. Lily stood up when Madeline walked in, her hands shaking. "I didn't want to hurt you, Maddie. I really didn't," she said, her voice breaking. "But there's something you don't know. Something I didn't tell you. Something that changed everything." Madeline's pulse raced. She sat down slowly, her eyes narrowing. "What is it?" Lily took a deep breath, as if gathering all her strength. "It wasn't just me who made that decision. There were others. There were things I had to protect. And, well, I'm afraid I hurt you in the process. But I need to explain." Madeline felt a cold chill run through her. The puzzle pieces were starting to shift. This wasn't just about her and Lily. There was something bigger, something much bigger, that Madeline had no idea about. Madeline could feel her heart pounding in her chest as Lily's words hung heavy in the air. Something was wrong. There was more to this than she could have ever imagined. Lily had always been the one to hold all the cards. Smooth, calculated, always in control. But today, her sister was trembling, the confidence she usually exuded nowhere to be found. "Lily," Madeline said slowly, trying to keep her voice steady despite the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "What do you mean? What aren't you telling me?" Lily hesitated, looking down at her coffee cup as if the answer could be found there. I didn't want to pull you into this. I swear I didn't. But there were things happening at home that I had to deal with. Mom and Dad." Lily's voice broke, and she wiped away a tear. "They're in serious debt, Maddie. The kind that could ruin everything. And they were asking me to cover it up, to protect the family name." Madeline sat back in her chair, trying to process the words. Debt? Her parents had always lived comfortably, always appeared to have everything under control. The idea that they were struggling to the point of being in serious financial trouble seemed impossible. "What are you talking about?" Madeline whispered, disbelief filling her voice. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I know," Lily said quietly. "I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But please, Maddie, please help me fix this. We're running out of time. I need you." Madeline stared at her sister for a long moment, the silence stretching between them. She had spent months building herself back up, learning to rely on her own strength. She wasn't the same girl who had left this house in tears. The girl who had been kicked out was gone, and in her place was someone who had learned that family could be just as damaging as it was supposed to be, comforting. "I can't help you," Madeline finally said, her voice firm. "Not like this. Not when you treated me like I didn't matter." Lily's face crumpled with guilt and desperation. "Please, Maddie, I need you. If you don't help, everything will fall apart. I swear it." Madeline stood up, looking down at her sister with a mixture of pity and anger. "You've already torn it all apart, Lily. It's too late for me to fix this. But maybe you can still fix yourself. I won't be there to do it for you." As Madeline turned to leave, she could feel the weight of everything that had been said between them. The betrayal, the lies, the secrets. For so long, she had been carrying the weight of this family's dysfunction. But now it was time for her to walk away. She was stronger now, stronger than ever. And no matter what Lily said, Madeline wasn't going to be pulled back into the darkness. Not this time. Madeline had never felt the silence so loud as when she walked away from Lily that day. It was as if the whole world had frozen, leaving her alone in the echo of everything that had just been revealed. She wasn't angry anymore, not in the way she had been when she was thrown out of the house. This was different. This was the kind of anger that came from realizing how deep the betrayal ran. And in some ways, it was worse. She didn't even know where she was going as she left the cafe. Her feet carried her to the park across the street, the one she used to visit as a child. Back then, she would sit under the big oak tree, imagining a world without conflict, without pain. But now, as she stood there, staring up at the same tree, the memories felt distant, as if they belonged to someone else. How did it all go so wrong? The question bounced around her head, but it didn't have an answer. It was too complicated for simple solutions. All she knew was that her family, the people she had trusted the most, had turned on her. And despite the love she still felt for them, especially Lily, there was no going back. Not anymore. Madeline sat down on the park bench, looking at the street in front of her, trying to make sense of the mess that had become her life. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking her from her thoughts. She took it out, seeing that it was a message from her mom. "I know things are bad right now, but please don't give up on us. Lily really needs you. We all do." Madeline stared at the message, her heart aching. Her mother's words felt like a lifeline thrown to her, but she didn't know if she could reach for it. Everything about her family was tangled up in lies and fear, and she couldn't be the one to fix it. Not anymore. The decision was made in that moment. Madeline wasn't going to return to the place she had once known as home. She couldn't keep putting herself second, living in the shadow of a family that never truly saw her, never truly understood her. It wasn't just about Lily anymore. It was about Madeline reclaiming the life she had almost lost. The next few days were a blur of work, long hours, and endless deadlines. Madeline threw herself into her job with a focus she hadn't known she had. Slowly, things started to shift. She had the kind of clarity she hadn't felt in years. Every email she sent, every task she completed, felt like a step away from the broken girl who had been tossed aside by her own flesh and blood. She was building a future that didn't depend on anyone else. But even in the midst of all this progress, Madeline couldn't stop thinking about her sister. She hadn't heard from Lily since their confrontation. No messages, no calls. The silence was deafening. And deep down, Madeline couldn't help but wonder if Lily had truly learned anything from their conversation, or if she was just going to keep running from the truth. 2 weeks later, Madeline received another call, this time from her mother. She had been expecting it, had been preparing for it, but that didn't make it any easier. "Madeline, it's your father." Her mother's voice trembled. "He's sick. It's bad. We need you here. We need the family." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. Her father, the man who had always been larger than life in her eyes, was sick. And suddenly, everything seemed so small. Her anger, her pride, everything that had kept her distant from her family. For the first time in months, Madeline felt torn. Do I go back? Do I put aside everything I've worked for and walk back into that broken home? Madeline didn't answer right away. Her mind was racing. Her father had always been the center of their family, the glue that held them together. And now, with him sick, everything was falling apart. Part of her wanted to rush to his side, to fix things, to make things right. But the other part of her, the part that had fought so hard to rebuild her life, was terrified of falling back into the same patterns, of being the one to sacrifice everything for a family that hadn't once fought for her. "I don't know if I can, Mom," Madeline finally said, her voice soft. "I've worked so hard to get where I am, and I don't want to go back to being that person again. The one who's always trying to fix everything for everyone else." There was a long pause before her mother replied. "I understand, Madeline. I really do. But your father, he needs you. I need you. We all do." Her words lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of expectation. Madeline closed her eyes, her thoughts a whirlwind. She had always been the one to put others first. But now, after everything she had been through, she didn't know if she could keep doing that. "I'll think about it," Madeline said finally. "But I need time. I need to figure out what's best for me." She ended the call, her mind in turmoil. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the choice between what was expected of her and what she truly needed for herself. She could go back, fix things, pretend that everything was okay. Or she could stay where she was, on the path she had started, the one that was only just beginning. For the first time, she realized that no matter what choice she made, it would be hers to own. It would be her decision. And that was something she had never had before. Madeline spent the next few days in a fog, caught between the overwhelming weight of family duty and the freedom she had finally found. She couldn't stop thinking about her father. She hadn't seen him in weeks, hadn't even spoken to him since the day she was kicked out. That wasn't their normal relationship. They had always been close. But after everything that had happened with Lily and the rest of the family, the thought of returning to that toxic environment felt suffocating. She spent her days at work, but her mind would constantly wander back to her father. He had always been her rock. Even when life had thrown curveballs their way, he had kept the family grounded. Now he was sick, really sick, and she was left with a choice that gnawed at her every waking moment. What if this is the last chance I get to see him? What if I regret it if I don't go? It was impossible to ignore the pull. The guilt weighed heavily on her. She could feel the pressure mounting as the days slipped by. She had spent so long building this new life, this new version of herself. But her family, the very people who had torn her apart, needed her. The last thing Madeline wanted was to go back and fall into the same cycle of dysfunction. But in her gut, she knew she had to do something. Her father's sickness wasn't something she could just ignore, no matter how badly she had been hurt. She couldn't just turn her back on him. One evening, after a long day of work, Madeline stood at the window of her apartment, watching the sun set over the city skyline. The orange and pink hues painted the sky, and for a moment, the world seemed still, calm. It was the first time in weeks she felt at peace. She had worked so hard to get to this point. She was stronger now, more confident. But even in the peace, the uncertainty lingered. Finally, she made the decision. The phone call was the hardest part. Her mother answered on the second ring. "Madeline, you're back," she said, the relief in her voice palpable. "I knew you'd come through. Your father, he needs to hear from you. He's asking for you. It's time, Maddie." Her mother's voice cracked, and for a moment, Madeline felt her walls start to crumble. She had spent so much time trying to protect herself from the hurt, the disappointment, but now everything felt raw. She took a deep breath, gathering her strength. "I'm coming," she said quietly. "I'll be there soon." The decision was made. Madeline packed a small bag, leaving behind the comfort and independence she had fought so hard to achieve. She wasn't sure what to expect when she walked through that front door again, but she knew it was the right choice. She couldn't undo the past, couldn't change the way her sister had hurt her, but maybe, just maybe, she could make something good come out of all this. She took a bus back to her childhood home. The journey felt long, each mile an emotional battle, but with every passing minute, the weight lifted just a little. As she approached the neighborhood, memories flooded her mind. The streets she used to walk down, the parks where she and Lily used to play as kids, the house where she had spent so many years trying to belong. When she finally arrived at the family home, nothing had changed. The house still stood the same, but it felt like a completely different place. As she walked up to the front door, her heart raced. It was as if her body remembered the trauma, the pain, but her mind had come to terms with it. She was no longer the girl who had been pushed out. She had grown stronger. Her mother opened the door, her face a mixture of relief and exhaustion. "Maddie," she whispered, her eyes welling with tears. "I knew you'd come." Madeline stepped inside, and for a moment, everything seemed normal. The familiar smell of her mother's cooking wafted from the kitchen. The hum of the refrigerator and the creak of the floorboards were all so familiar. But the tension in the air was palpable. Madeline had walked back into the past, into a family that was on the verge of collapse, and she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same. As she walked to the living room, her father was sitting in his favorite chair, looking frailer than she had ever seen him. His once strong frame was hunched over, his face drawn and pale. When he saw her, his eyes lit up with a mix of joy and guilt. "Madeline," he whispered, his voice weak but filled with emotion. "You're here." She stood there for a moment, just staring at him. The man who had been her protector, her guide, was now a shadow of the person she had known. It was heartbreaking, but it also solidified her decision. She had come back for him, not for Lily, not for anyone else, just for him. "I'm here, Dad," she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her throat. "I'm here." They sat together for hours, talking quietly, catching up on everything that had happened in the past few months. Her father apologized for everything that had happened, everything that went wrong in their family. But his apology, though heartfelt, didn't fix anything. It didn't change the fact that the damage had been done. But Madeline knew this was just the beginning of healing, not just for her father, but for herself. She had come back, but she wasn't the same person who had walked out that door months ago. She wasn't the girl who had been kicked out. She was stronger, more self-assured. And in that moment, she realized something. She didn't need her family's approval anymore. She didn't need them to tell her she was worthy. She already knew it. As the evening wore on, Madeline made a promise to herself. No matter what came next, no matter how this chapter in her life unfolded, she would never let anyone take away her strength again. She would never let anyone make her feel small. The next few days passed in a haze of hospital visits and quiet conversations. Madeline stayed at the family house, not sure if she was there because her father truly needed her or because she had nowhere else to go. It wasn't the family she had known, not the way it used to be, but it was the family she had. And sometimes that was the hardest thing to accept. Her father's condition was critical, and there were days when he barely spoke, when the pain seemed too much for him to bear. Madeline would sit by his side, holding his hand, remembering the man who had once been larger than life in her eyes. Her father had been strong, confident, always there for her, until the cracks had started to show. Now, with the reality of his illness looming over them, the family's dysfunction seemed insignificant. They were all just trying to hold on, trying to do what they could before time ran out. Madeline tried to ignore the weight of the past. She had told herself that she was only here for her father, that she could get through the awkwardness with Lily, the tension with her mother. But it wasn't that simple. Everything about being back in this house made her uncomfortable. The echoes of arguments she had forgotten, the unspoken resentments between her parents, the way her mother still walked on eggshells around Lily. It was all there, as it had always been, only now it felt heavier, more suffocating. One evening after a long day at the hospital, Madeline was sitting in the living room, her eyes fixed on the soft glow of the fireplace. She could hear her mother and Lily talking in the kitchen, their voices low, but the words clearly carrying a weight they couldn't ignore. "I just don't understand, Mom." Lily's voice drifted in. "Why didn't you tell me about the debt sooner? We could have figured this out together." Madeline's chest tightened. The conversation felt like an intrusion into her own thoughts, an echo of everything that had brought her here. She had already heard enough of these arguments, but the bitterness, the betrayal, and the guilt, they were all there, weaving their way through every word. Her mother's voice was softer, but there was an underlying frustration. "I didn't want to burden you, Lily. I didn't want you to feel like you had to fix everything. You've been through enough." Madeline's eyes burned with unshed tears. Her mother had always tried to protect her children from the truth, from the consequences of their father's choices. But what had it really cost them? What had they lost by pretending everything was okay, by hiding their pain from each other? The anger that had been simmering inside Madeline bubbled up again, but it wasn't directed at her mother this time. It was directed at the system that had shaped their family's dysfunction. They were all victims of it. Her father, her mother, even Lily, who had been dragged into it, fighting for control in a house that had never truly belonged to anyone. "I didn't ask for any of this," Madeline muttered to herself. She was tired of feeling like she had to carry the burden for everyone else's mistakes. She was tired of being the one who had to forgive, the one who had to rebuild when the cracks ran too deep to be fixed with a few simple words. She stood up abruptly, needing to escape the house for a while. She grabbed her coat and stepped out into the crisp evening air. The city was quiet at night, but there was something soothing about the peace, the way the world felt so much smaller when she was alone with her thoughts. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she needed to be away from the house, away from the weight of everything that had happened. She wandered through the quiet streets, her mind racing until she found herself standing at the edge of a small park. It was one of the places she and Lily used to visit when they were younger, back before the world had gotten so complicated. She sat on the bench, her breath visible in the cold air, and closed her eyes. The world felt distant, muffled, like everything she had known had been a dream. She had tried so hard to make sense of it all, to piece together the broken pieces of her life, but she was beginning to realize something important. There was no fixing it. There was no going back to the way things had been. Madeline had always thought that if she could just make her family understand, if she could just make them see her worth, everything would fall into place. But now she saw the truth. She didn't need them to understand. She didn't need their approval. She had spent too many years measuring her worth by their standards, by their love, and it had only left her feeling empty. She didn't need their validation anymore. She had come this far without them. And as much as it hurt, as much as it tore at her to see her family falling apart, she realized that the only person who could fix her life was her. No one else could do that for her. A voice broke through her thoughts, soft but familiar. Madeline? She turned around and saw Lily standing a few feet away, her hands shoved into her coat pockets, her posture stiff. It was the first time they had spoken since that day at the cafe. Madeline didn't know what to say. She wasn't sure if she was ready to hear anything Lily had to say. "I didn't think you'd come out here," Lily said quietly, her voice almost apologetic. "I thought you were staying in the house tonight." "I needed some air," Madeline replied, her tone cool but not unkind. "I needed time to think." Lily hesitated for a moment before she sat down next to her. "Madeline, I know I've screwed up. I know I hurt you, and I can't change that. I can't undo the things I did to you. But I want you to know that I'm sorry for everything." Madeline didn't speak at first. The apology felt too late, like a bandage on a wound that had long since healed. But something inside her shifted, and she realized that maybe forgiveness wasn't for Lily. Maybe it was for her. "I know you're sorry," Madeline said, her voice softer now. "But I need more than just words. I need actions. I need to see that you've changed, that you're not just repeating the same patterns." Lily nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "I've been trying, Maddie. I swear I have. But I don't know how to make it right. I don't know how to fix what I broke." Madeline took a deep breath, the cold air biting at her skin. "You don't need to fix everything. You just need to start with yourself. And I need to do the same. For so long, I've been trying to fix this family, fix my relationship with you. But I can't. I can't carry this anymore." The words felt like a weight lifting off her chest, and for the first time, Madeline realized she didn't need to hold on to the past any longer. She could let go. She could move on. And it was okay to leave the family behind if it meant protecting herself. "I've come to realize something," Madeline said quietly. "I've been trying to find peace in a place that doesn't have it. I've been trying to make everyone else happy, but I forgot about myself. I need to start living for me." Lily looked at her, her expression torn. "I understand. I really do. But, Maddie, do you think we can still be a family? Maybe not the way we were, but can we still have something?" Madeline thought about it for a long moment. Family wasn't something that could be repaired overnight. It wasn't something that could be fixed with a single conversation or a simple apology. But maybe, just maybe, they could start over. It would take time. It would take effort. But the first step was realizing that it was okay to let go of the past. "I don't know, Lily," Madeline said, her voice gentle. "But I'm willing to try. Not for you, but for me. For the person I've become." Lily nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'm here, Maddie. I always will be." Madeline turned her gaze to the darkening sky, feeling the weight of the moment settle in her chest. The road ahead was uncertain. There were no guarantees, no promises that everything would work out perfectly. But one thing was clear. Madeline had found her strength, her voice, and in that moment, she knew that she could face whatever came next. She wasn't the same girl she had been. She was someone new, someone stronger. And for the first time in a long time, that was enough.